Okay, we're spending a while on what Feng Yulan calls Neo Daoism, dark enigma learning. Um, and I'd like to tease out some themes from Guo Xiang. Again, I'm apologizing to any Chinese pronouncers for my pronunciation. Guo Xiang is what I'm going with. And his commentary on the Shuangzi. I'm just going to say again, I think it is maybe the best presentation of philosophical Taoism in certain ways, or at least a certain kind of philosophical Taoism. And also, as I've been expressing, I basically agree with it for what that's worth. Not much, but it's one thing that directs me to try to figure out what's going on. Is my sympathy. Provisional sympathy with a lot of it. One thing that's really, I think, it's problematic to be a Westerner using this material, of course. And I better be self-critical about that to whatever extent I can be. Like the limits of my self-knowledge on this are extreme. But I think it provides a beautiful contrast to a lot of the Western tradition. In terms of theism, a alternative to theism, and then more widely and relatedly, visions of accounts of human agency and free action and moral responsibility. So there's a metaphysics and there's an ethics, and I want to try to talk about some of the central passages that make that connection. In the Western tradition, I guess, I think the dominant strand in philosophy of action is things like Aristotle's practical syllogism, which pictures every human action essentially, insofar as it's an action and not just a physical event that's happening to you, as intentional, and teleological, so that you project a future, that state that you want to reach, and then you administer means, those are your actions, to realize your goal. That's a picture of human agency. It's a picture of what a human self is, basically. I mean, that's what's supposed to be characteristically human. Like, there are also animal things going on in our bodies, passions, mere physical reactions, autonomic stuff like you're breathing maybe or walking without thinking about it. But the characteristically human dimension of action and the moral dimension of action comes from this intentional agency. Now, I would read the whole Taoist tradition as a contrast to that. And I think that basically that picture of human agency is available to ancient Chinese philosophers. Okay, I think Mozi in his utilitarianism presupposes something like that. Like, why are we acting this way? Because we want to have the most happiness that we can have. Very Aristotelian, really. Although he goes in, it is more utilitarian than Aristotle in Mozi. And even, and in the monotheisms, the idea really that the universe is produced through agency, or even that it could only be produced through agency, as in the argument from design for God's existence. Well, I mean, the Western tradition is complex on all these things, as is the Chinese tradition, but a totally different picture of how we do act and how we should act. Both the descriptive and the normative levels is provided in this text by Kuo Hsiang, I think, beautifully, but still cryptically, all right. Now, again, Guo Xiang's text is a commentary on the Shuangzi. Um, and okay, so I'm going to shift from Feng Yulan's chapter on Neo-Daoism in the period of disunity, chapter 2 of that, to my reconstrual of or like reordering of the I took basically all the passages I'm going to read now are my kind of Englishizing of basically Feng Yulan's versions, although I have a number of other sources too. But this stuff is still not beautifully available, fully available in English. So I just kind of produced a text by analogy to the Tao Te Ching, really, of, 80 fragments, not fragments really, but 80 comments by Guo Xiang on the Shuangzi, to try to make it presented as an independent philosophy. It is and it isn't. I mean, I think that, he thinks he's interpreting the Shuangzi only, or he presents it that way, but he goes well beyond the Shuangzi in a number of respects. And, it's worth wondering whether he's got the Shuangzi right in some matters as well. All right, so I tried to draw your attention to in the Wu Wei Jing to the passages 59 to 63, which I think are those are my numberings. And so what I'm doing is taking texts like Feng Yulan, and I'm kind of making it what I think is clearer, better, and more independent English. And, thinking about some of the basic concepts as I do that, in the way Feng Yulan understands them and the way a Taoist would understand them, or insofar as I can know that, I guess. Okay. So, this is maybe the most famous passage from Guo Xiang's commentary on the Shuangzi. What does number 59 in my ordering in the quote-unquote Wu Wei Jing? What does not exist cannot produce things that exist. Something cannot come from nothing. How then is existence possible? Things spontaneously produce themselves. That's really all there is to metaphysics. We talked about this before. And I talked about it maybe even also on a previous video lecture on the dark enigma learning. The self cannot produce things. The self cannot produce things, and it cannot be produced. Probably because to put that right there too, it indicates that the self is actually nothing. Or, what is it? A delusion of some sort, or it's a kind of social production, or it's the Tao within. But that means that it's non-being, says Guo Xiang, and then it can't produce anything. He's thinking of the self maybe as the empty space within each of us, or something like that. Well, then it can't cause things. And now we're going to very quickly get to like this kind of anti-egoistic vision of what it is to be a human being. Emphasizing our connections and rather than our distance from things that would allow us to administer them toward our ends. The self cannot produce things, and it cannot be produced. Because something cannot arise from nothing, and nothing cannot arise from something. So, this is not the only passage that works on the self as nothing thing, which does sound awfully Buddhist. So that's a question here in 300 AD. Is there a Buddhist influence? Or are they just kind of, are Taoism and Buddhism, do they coincide in some respects? Not in all, for sure. And is that what produced Chan? In other words, like people immediately heard Buddhism as, oh, that's Shuangzi, Anyway, things are not created intentionally. Things are not created intentionally. Okay? So, there's no God, I think, is the one thing. Nothing creates this universe intentionally. There's no goal. There's no overarching telos. Aristotle certainly presupposed that there was. I mean, just asserted that there was, like it was something obvious. Right? So we got this non-teleological picture of the universe and of nature here that I think presents interesting alternatives to a lot of the Western tradition. The self exists for itself, in itself, simply in virtue of being what it is. That means there are no overall explanations, because the principle of existence and action in each thing is that thing. The principle of existence and action in each thing is that thing and emerges spontaneously. Okay, so the whole, I think I've said this already, but the whole emerges spontaneously because there can be no explanation. He thinks he's proven that conceptually, basically, by this kind of regress argument or reductio. And something cannot arise from nothing, etc. This Parmenidean style argument. And so the whole arises without explanation. That's what we mean by spontaneously. And it arises from no agent. That is, it doesn't arise intentionally. That's something else we mean by spontaneously. Okay? The universe is an improvisation. Like Louis Armstrong on the cornet. A great Louis Armstrong cornet solo, say Chimes Blues, early on, is improvised, spontaneous, free, and also it emerges as it must. Like you hear it once and I think this was the response when it first came out, though that's not my generation either. You hear it once and you go like, wow, like I have no idea what might happen next. That's really volatile, really interesting, spontaneous improvisation right on the record there. And the third time you hear it, you go like, okay, it's got to be exactly what it is. And what Louis Armstrong is there in that spontaneous action. Of course, it's not like a mindless action. He knows what kind of song he's playing. He's rehearsed 1,000 times. He's practiced to within an inch of his life, I bet. Okay, but then when it emerges spontaneously as what he is. And that's a model of human action as Wu Wei. That's an ideal of human action as Wu Wei that takes it completely out of this intentional agent vision and rethinks what freedom could possibly mean there. It's freedom is not deciding to act sort of autonomously of circumstance somehow or something like that. It's acting, freedom in this sense is acting by Wu Wei improvisationally in a context of connection with all things. Which is not to say you can just make something happen because you want it to happen. That's what we're saying is an illusion. And that's a terrible way to live. Like you're thinking like, oh, this shouldn't be the way it is. I'm going to change everything. Well, first of all, I don't think you can. Or I'm going to change something. All right, now, I mean, but so what is this counseling? Passivity? You know, that's a hard question. I mean, he specifically is saying that Wu Wei is not passivity. But it's action without agency. Action is part of the emergence of the way things are, or something like that. Okay, so let me try a few more passages here. This is 61 of the Wu Wei Jing. Not only is it impossible for not being to become being, it is impossible for being to become not being. So, from where and how do things, and for that matter, the absence of things, arise? Things and the void. Atoms in the void. From where do they come? Not that he's an atomist. What came first? If we say yin and yang came first, how did they come? From where? From what? Maybe nature came first. But nature is only another name for beings. I think I read this before. Suppose I say that Tao came first, but the Tao is only another name for not being. So how can it arise? There must be another thing or not thing, and so on infinitely. When you get down to it, we cannot say anything except that things just are. That they arise spontaneously and spontaneously disappear. Everything, this is 62, everything is alike in that it is part of nature. There's only one fabric of reality, and we are fully part of it. And there's nothing in us that exceeds the fabric of ordinary reality. As maybe Western agency is fundamentally conceived, like mind or soul in the West, for instance. But nothing knows itself. Nothing knows itself or commands itself consciously. So, this glass doesn't know itself or command itself consciously. But he's, I think, also saying that we don't know ourselves or command ourselves consciously. We're under the illusion that we do sometimes, though. Everything changes all the time. The world is always in process. But nothing commands things to change. They change themselves and one another spontaneously. And it might even be that our conscious attempts to change things are also part of the spontaneous self-emergence. Like that's part of our nature. And now you could start going, I'm wondering if you can draw any conclusions from this or not. But they change themselves and one another, things change themselves and one another spontaneously by the simple emergence of their own nature and of the nature in them. Leave things alone, and things will be perfectly realized without your help. I mean, one thing is like intentional action is unreal. It's not what it appears to be. Maybe. But the other thing is that it's useless in a way. Like things are going to be what they are, no matter what you do. But then there's always this flavor of like, oh no, intentional action backfires. It accomplishes just the opposite of what you think it will, which is often true. Like policy, government policies, for instance, often accomplish the opposite of what they intend. We could point to some examples, but all right. So, but those are two different things. Like, is it unreal or is it counterproductive? Are you already a sage because actually you never act in this intentional agential way anyway? Okay, or and it's just a matter of getting rid of the illusion that you do, or are you acting that way and you should stop because it'll backfire? The Tao Te Ching is ambiguous on that too. Is this a reality or is this a norm? Well, it's the norm of Wu Wei. And at a minimum, you should cultivate awareness of your connection in this web of things and the way that your action in it is the spontaneous emergence of your nature rather than some kind of conscious administration of means to your ends. 63, you can trace the causes of things infinitely, or else you come to a first cause. But if there is a first cause, a creator, but is there a first cause, a creator or not? Obviously, if there is not, he can't create anything. And if there is, he himself is spontaneously self-created. Either way, all things emerge spontaneously. Stuff just keeps happening. Everything emerges in an uncontrolled improvisation, whether there is a creator or not. Nothing, therefore, is commanded by anything else. Nothing is commanded by anything else. Like this ontological democracy or ontological anarchy. There's no hierarchy of beings, no great chain of being, no set of beings that are more valuable than others because they're angels or they're immaterial souls or they're agents in a world of mere things or they're rational creatures in a world of mere passionate creatures like animals or whatever. All right. Well, I just thought I'll pick out some earlier in this arrangement, things that I think at least suggest the ways we're going to treat human action, because that's absolutely central here. That's a central theme of this text, if you ask me. That's the title I gave it, the Wu Wei Jing, the book of non-doing. So non-doing again is conceived as a way of doing, and that's definitely emphasized in Guo Xiang over and over again. Like, I'm not telling you just sit in the forest playing the flute, bro. I'm telling you about a certain way of doing whatever it is you're doing, including being an official, for example, which he was, I believe. So, how would you act if you thought that the whole universe was like this and you were part of that, fully a part of it? Now, I mean, that's some profound stuff, right? Like, in other words, like, we're going to get ethics, a completely different ethics, a completely different vision of human action from a different metaphysics. Real quick, all right? So, and I think this is characteristic of all metaphysics and all ethics. Maybe the metaphysics is emerging from an ethical orientation. Maybe the vision of the whole universe as Wu Wei, as spontaneously self-emerging as it must, comes from the basic recommendation for human action that you find, or sagehood that you find in Lao Tzu and Shuangzi. So here's number 9 of the Wu Wei Jing. I did publish this, I guess, on Amazon. Nothing makes nature what it is. Nothing owns nature or possesses anything. Nothing possesses anything. Nature is not a hierarchy in which some things obey other things. Each thing is what it is. That is the way. All right. All of this is 17. All of this is as true of government as of birds, that they spontaneously enact what they are. Government. The political implications are quick. They're drawn quickly. Yao, legendary sage ruler, did not govern by seizing command of things. He governed because that was his necessity. That's why he governed perfectly. He governed by Wu Wei. He governed because it was his nature to govern. It was his situation demanded it, not because he wanted to or because he made it happen by intentional action. But because he was spontaneously expressing what he was in the situation that he was. It's not too much to say that he didn't govern. Certainly he didn't force things to be what he wanted, which I'm calling agency, trying to force things to be what you want. We should think about this in relation to Stoicism, if you wanted to do that. He allowed things to become, Yao, the legendary sage ruler, ruled perfectly because he allowed things to become what they already were. Now again, can you change things by intentional action or not? It seems like suddenly you're saying maybe you can, because the alternative is to allow things to be just what they are, which is recommended. I think we could work on that as apparent contradiction. Here's 25. The sage reconciles opposites and understands that things are what they are. Now that's a commonplace, of course. It is what it is. Every coach tells you that after they lose. Now, it is what it is. Therefore, he can participate, which might help a little bit, actually. Like, I can't do anything about that now, right? That's over, that game. It is what it is, right? All we can do is think about what's going to happen next, so prepare for the next opponent. Therefore, he can participate, the sage, in the changes around him and find that everything is all right. So the alternative to making change that you think should be made is participate in the changes that are all around you. Now, really, you probably should think about the political implications of this. Some of them might be subversive and anarchic. Some of them might be counseling, like I say, passivity in the face of injustice, which would be a problem, I hope. He embraces things, the sage, and knows they are all what they are, and that what they are is sacred. Which is practically a quotation from the Tao Te Ching, I think. People want him to rule, but he works with no goal. Hence, he can respond to the world. Again, that would be a pretty interesting politician. I have no goals, really. It's the opposite of Elizabeth Warren, who has a plan. I think I did this on a previous lecture, but anyway, elect me, and I'll, it'll be Wu Wei from now on. We'll be not doing. Hence, he can respond to the world. If you simply identify yourself with the mystery in truth and appreciate the way things are, you participate in the process by which the world transforms itself, from out of itself, spontaneously. So the idea is the ethical oomph, believe it or not, is to identify yourself with the Tao, the mystery. Identify yourself with the world. Let's try that. And act spontaneously as part of it. To what extent is that possible? To what extent are we already doing that? Maybe most of what we do is already that. What percentage of what I do is stuff that I form the intention to do and then accomplish? And what percentage of what I do is stuff that I'm just doing to get through my day? Like when I'm negotiating, I'm walking around the furniture instead of banging my shins into it. I'm just like conforming to the way things are. And when I breathe, I'm just conforming to the way things are. I'm just letting the natural mechanism flow. All right, how about when I treat you well or treat you badly, though? Is that just the way things are? But I think the idea, too, is that one of the ways we oppress each other is that we try to hold one another to account. I don't think you should be what you are. And so I'm going to seize you and reform you. Right? We need to change your neighborhood. We need to re-educate your children. You are not enough. If we stop thinking about that, each other like that, like as things that are, badly in need of fixing, by conscious programming, I wonder if the world would be a better place or a worse place. Maybe better. 34, each thing has its spontaneity, and in the spontaneity of each thing, what it is emerges necessarily. Stay with things and come into accord with them. Stay with things and come into accord with them instead of judging things and trying to make them come into accord with you as you see it. Now, that's very Stoic, actually, but I think there's also really important differences. Try to do whatever happens. Try to do whatever happens. I'm not quite sure whether that I'm translating or reworking a sentence by Guo Xiang there, or whether I'm just throwing that in. Try to do whatever happens. But it's a nice paradox, ain't it? I don't know if it's a nice paradox. Maybe it's just an annoying paradox, but it's a very Taoist paradox. And, maybe in its center, it means find the sacredness of the way things are and stop torturing yourself with the idea that you understand how things are and that you must transform them, because that's a way to drive yourself nuts. But actually, as a real serious ethical question, what can we transform, even if this intentional action is not some kind of illusion? And what can't we? That's an everyday task. Like, what do I have to accept, and what do I have to fight? But, somewhere in that balance, it's possible to drive yourself crazy or find some kind of peace. All right. And the Taoists counsel peace through acceptance, that's obvious, or even ecstatic affirmation, saying the world is sacred as it is. Really? All the bad shit happening is sacred as it is? How about the death of George Floyd? Should I accept that? Like, is that the spontaneous way that being happens? Or is that people fucking up by acting intentionally when they shouldn't be? Or, I don't know, does this really help us? I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure I need it, at least a dose of it. And I'm pretty sure that it rests on the truth, a truth, that I do not in any way transcend the physical reality that I'm embedded within. Okay? I don't want to, really. We're all in the same fabric. So it's an argument against human exceptionalism, for one thing. If humans are exceptional, for Guo Xiang, it's because we're exceptionally deluded. And we're going exceptionally wrong by thinking that we're here to run this damn sucker, okay? Because if we really, the more power we have over reality, the more unintended consequences, fatal unintended consequences arise. All right. With great power comes great destruction. All right, I'll see you next week. I'm kind of starting to get immunized here. Live soon outside, maybe?